Charlie Chaplin, The Boy with the Bowler Hat, London, 1894. The city groans with noise, horses striking cobblestones, vendors calling out, steam hissing from pipes. But step away from the busy streets and you find another world. Narrow alleys, rooms damp with mildew, children barefoot, hungry and forgotten. In one such room sits a boy. His name is Charles. He is 5 years old. His mother Hannah once sang for crowds in the music halls. Her voice was bright, a melody people remembered. But sickness has stolen it. Now she coughs in the dark, her body thin, her smile a mask she puts on for her children. His father is gone, drowned in drink, drifting in and out of their lives. That leaves only Charles and his older brother Sidney. Two boys learning to survive in the shadows. Charles grips a stub of chalk. On the floorboards, he draws figures with round heads and long, floppy shoes. They tumble, trip, and bow. In his mind, they move with life. For a moment, he forgets the hunger gnawing at his stomach. But hunger always comes back. Bread crusts, watered soup, sometimes not even that. Some days their mother cannot rise from her mattress. Charles hears her whisper, "Take care of your brother. Don't let the darkness take you." One night, Hannah tries again to earn money. She climbs on stage at a shabby hall. She begins to sing, but halfway through her voice breaks. The crowd turns cruel. They boo. Coins strike the stage like stones. Charles watches from the seats, too young to understand why, but old enough to feel shame burning inside him. And then, something unexpected. The little boy climbs onto the stage. The audience stares. He is small, ragged, trembling. But instead of crying, he copies them. He mimics their jeers in a high squeak, stumbles across the stage, falls flat on his face, then stares at the floor as if it betrayed him. The hall erupts. Not in anger this time, but in laughter. Loud, unstoppable laughter. For the first time, Charles feels it. The power of laughter. The pain in his belly doesn't vanish, but it softens. The sound of the crowd lifts him higher than food ever could. In that moment, something awakens. He doesn't know its name yet. He only knows this. A spark has been lit inside a boy who had nothing. And sparks can grow into fire. They are taken in winter. The sky is the color of tin, and the wind bites through their thin coats. A man with a ledger writes their names without looking at them. Chaplin, Charles. Chaplin, Sidney. The gate closes, and the sound is final. Inside the workhouse, everything is measured. Steps, spoons, minutes. Boys march in lines, faces blank with practice. Boots scrape stone, and keys jingle at the belts of men who never hurry. Charles learns quickly. Speak only when spoken to. Keep your eyes down. Share nothing you cannot afford to lose. Meals come like clockwork and vanish just as fast. Grey broth. Bread that tastes of dust. He learns to hold hunger like a small, angry animal inside him, to pet it until it sleeps. At night, he and Sidney whisper under thin blankets, planning feasts they will never eat. One day, Charles says, he doesn't know when, only that the word keeps them warm. There are rules about everything: how to fold a blanket, how to scrub a floor, how to be invisible. Yet even here, life leaks in through the cracks. A laundress hums an old tune while wringing linen. Charles files the melody away. A tired clerk rubs his eyes, blinks too slowly. Charles copies the blink in his mind, the way the man's mouth sags at the corner. He discovers a new kind of survival: watching. He studies the gatekeeper's stiff walk, the way his heel lands before his toe. He studies the swagger of older boys who have learned to bare their teeth like dogs. He studies the chaplain's solemn nod, the way his hands float just above the Bible, as if he's afraid to touch it. Every gesture is a clue. every movement a sentence. If he can read them, he will not be surprised. If he can copy them, he can disappear, or be seen if he chooses. Sometimes he cannot help himself. In the yard, a knot of boys shiver in the wind. Charles lifts his chin, tucks his arms behind his back, and becomes the gatekeeper, stiff, important, ridiculous. He exaggerates the heel-first walk. He gives a tiny cough of authority. The boys snort, then chuckle, then laugh. The sound crackles in the cold like a hidden fire. A beadle sees them and cuffs him hard. "No clowning!" The laughter dies at once, but its warmth lingers under his stinging skin. He files the pain beside the joke. Both will be useful later. Nights are the worst. He thinks of his mother's voice, once bright and clean, now a ghost in his ear. He sees her hands smooth a dress that isn't there. Sometimes a cart rumbles past outside, and for a breath he imagines it will stop, that she will step down and call his name. It doesn't. So he makes a promise to the dark. I will not let the workhouse decide what I am. He cannot choose food or freedom, not yet. But he can choose how to see. He can choose what to remember. A limp, a blink, a stumble that becomes a dance. In the morning the bell rings, the line forms, the boys move as one. But inside one of them, a stage is being built, plank by plank, out of hunger, out of cold, out of the small, dangerous joy of making other boys laugh when laughter is forbidden. The workhouse taught him silence. The stage taught him noise. When Hannah returned, frail but free from the asylum for a time, the boys slipped back into the world outside those iron gates. They carried scars no one could see. Hunger had made them cautious. Shame had made them sharp. Yet the streets of London pulled at them with music, posters, and the promise of performance. Sydney, older and sturdier, found work with a troupe of juvenile performers. He carried props, sang in choruses, learned to tumble. When he came home at night, his eyes burned with stories of footlights and applause. Charles listened, drinking it in like water. He wanted it. No. Needed it. It wasn't long before Sydney pulled his younger brother with him. Charlie was small, wiry and eager. On stage, his body seemed to move before his mind did, instinct guiding every step. He discovered that a stumble could be a joke, a pause could be a punchline. Even his sadness had a rhythm, one the audience somehow felt in their laughter. Life on the road was harsh. The troupe crisscrossed shabby halls, sleeping in cheap lodgings that smelled of damp straw and coal smoke. Meals were uncertain, pay even more so. Some nights they went hungry, their costumes patched and repatched, but when the curtain rose, the hunger melted. For those brief moments, Charles was someone else, no longer the boy of shadows, but a spark in the dark, a figure who could turn silence into joy. He watched the veterans closely, the way a comic tilted his hat before the punchline, the timing of a song, the sudden stillness that could make a room hold its breath. Every detail mattered, and Charles stored them all inside him like precious coins. Yet beneath the thrill ran doubt. After a show, when the lights dimmed and the audience was gone, he felt the emptiness creep back in. The applause faded quickly. The hunger did not. He wondered if this life was escape, or just another cage, painted brighter but just as fragile. Still, each time he stepped on stage, he chose to believe. The workhouse had taught him to endure. The stage whispered that he could create. And though he was still only a boy in patched shoes, Charles Chaplin had found the first real doorway out of poverty. One laugh, one stumble, one bow at a time. The posters promised more than London ever could. Fred Carno's Comedians, a troupe bound not just for the provinces, but across the sea to America. Sydney was already rising, and soon Charlie was offered a place as well. He hesitated for only a breath. The boy who once drew chalk figures on floorboards was now boarding a ship, chasing laughter across the Atlantic. The voyage was rough. Third-class bunks crammed with bodies, air thick with coal smoke and salt. Charlie lay awake at night, rocked by the waves, wondering if he was sailing toward fortune or folly. The ocean stretched endless, as though the world he had known, London's alleys, the workhouse, his mother's fading voice, was being scrubbed away with every mile. And then, New York. Noise unlike anything he had ever heard. Streets blazing with lights, buildings scraping the sky. Crowds that moved like rivers, unstoppable, alive. Charlie stood on the pier, his hat in his hands, his heart thudding. He was nobody here, just another skinny boy with patched shoes and too many dreams. But on stage, something shifted. The American audiences roared louder than any he had known. They wanted speed, surprise, daring. Charlie gave it to them. Falls sharper, faces brighter, movements cut with an edge honed by hunger itself. They laughed, and in their laughter he heard not just approval but opportunity. Still, loneliness clung to him. After the curtain fell, he walked the streets alone, dazzled yet uncertain. The lights were beautiful, but they were not home. In boarding houses he scribbled notes, sketches of routines, fragments of characters who tripped and bowed inside his mind. He did not know it yet, but he was building the bones of a figure who would one day belong to the whole world. One night, staring out at the Hudson River, he whispered the vow again, the one he had made in the workhouse shadows. I will not let this life decide what I am. America was vast, unforgiving, unpredictable. But it was also a stage, larger than any he had stood upon. And somewhere in its chaos, Charlie felt it, the stirrings of a role that would carry him farther than any ship ever could. California, sunshine, dust, and the smell of orange groves. Charlie had come west with Carno's troupe, but soon found himself in a place stranger than any music hall, the flickering world of moving pictures. Keystone Studios was chaos, cameras cranked by hand, actors stumbling through scenes, directors shouting for more speed, more pratfalls, more noise. At first he was just another player. Quick feet, sharp face, a body made for comedy. But something gnawed at him. The routines felt empty, jokes without heart. He wanted more than laughter that vanished like smoke. He wanted a figure the world could recognize, a soul wrapped in humor. One afternoon, called to set without direction, he wandered into the costume shed. On impulse, he picked through the racks, baggy trousers, a too-tight jacket, shoes far too large, a bowler hat, a cane. He dressed himself in contradiction, old and young, proud and shabby, foolish yet dignified. When he looked in the mirror, the figure looked back as though it had always been waiting. On set, he shuffled into view. The others laughed, not at him, but with him. He tipped his hat, twirled the cane, stumbled, then recovered with a puff of pride. Something electric rippled through the crew. Here was not just a gag, but a character, a man both ridiculous and noble, a tramp. The audiences felt it instantly. On screen, the little man with the bowler hat was beaten, ignored, mocked, and yet he always rose again, dusting himself off with a flick of dignity. People saw themselves in him, the poor, the forgotten, the dreamers who lived on scraps of hope. He was every nobody, and therefore everybody. Charlie watched the reaction with awe. Crowds roared in darkened theaters, laughter tumbling like waves. For the first time, his comedy carried not only noise but meaning. The boy who once imitated wardens in the workhouse now held the world in his hands. But with triumph came a tremor of fear. Could he keep this figure alive? Would success change him or swallow him? The tramp's shoes were far too large, yet somehow Charlie knew. They fit him better than anything he had ever worn. The tramp had made him famous. Famous beyond imagining. From London's music halls to America's Nickelodeons, his face flickered everywhere. Children copied his shuffle in the streets, men tipped their hats the way he did. Women laughed at the tilt of his cane. Overnight, the boy who once begged for bread had become the most recognized figure in the world, and yet fame was no gentle gift. It was a storm. Studios clamored for more films, faster, bigger. Tabloids dug for secrets, whispering of affairs, of scandals, of failures. Every stumble offstage was magnified into a headline. The laughter he had built his life upon began to feel like a demand, endless and unrelenting. Charlie worked like a man possessed. He wrote, directed, acted, sometimes all in the same day. Perfection was his obsession. He drove crews to exhaustion, searching for the exact flick of a hand, the perfect pause before a fall. He could not stop. To stop was to risk vanishing, and vanishing meant the shadows would return. The money poured in, more than he had ever dreamed, but it did not ease him. His childhood poverty lingered like a ghost at his table. He lived in mansions now, ate at tables heavy with silver, yet sometimes caught himself hiding coins in his pocket, as though he might need them for bread tomorrow. And the crowds adored the tramp, but rarely the man. People cheered the bowler hat, the shoes, the stumble. Few cared for the fragile boy beneath, the one who had once whispered promises to the dark. Still, the films grew bolder. In The Kid, he poured out his childhood, the hunger, the bond between a lost man and a lost child. Audiences wept. For the first time, laughter and tears lived side by side in his work. He had given the world a piece of himself, and it had cost him more than he admitted. Success had carried him far from the workhouse gates, but at night alone Charlie wondered. Had he escaped poverty, or had he simply built a richer kind of prison? The tramp had survived wars, hunger, and the cruelty of the streets, but Charlie himself could not survive America's suspicion. The world had changed. The Great Depression, the war, the rise of new ideologies, every headline seemed to demand a side. Charlie's films, once pure laughter, had begun to carry sharp edges. In The Great Dictator, he mocked tyranny with courage few dared. The speech at the end, fierce and trembling, was not comedy. It was a cry from his own soul. Audiences roared, but the powerful listened differently. Whispers spread. He was too radical, too sympathetic to the poor, too un-American. The press circled like wolves. Every scandal, real or imagined, was dragged into print. His private life was picked apart, each mistake sharpened into a weapon. For a man who had built his empire on silence, it was the noise that nearly crushed him. In 1952, as he sailed for a premiere in London, the letter came. America had closed its doors. His re-entry permit revoked. Exile without trial, without farewell. He stood on the deck of the ship, ocean wind cutting his face, and felt the old fear return. The fear of being unwanted, of being shut out. Once again he was a boy at the workhouse gate, his name crossed off a ledger. But exile did not mean silence. In Switzerland, far from Hollywood's roar, he wrote, composed, dreamed. His laughter softened, but it never vanished. He watched his children play, their voices carrying through green hills, and thought of his own childhood streets, grey, cruel, but alive with the spark that had made him. The world still watched his films, still laughed, still wept, and though he no longer stood before the cameras, the tramp walked on without him, eternal, untouchable. Yet at night, as snow fell quietly outside his window, Charlie felt the old ache. He had conquered the world, but had never quite found a place to belong in it. Old age came quietly. The fire of the spotlight dimmed, replaced by the glow of lamplight in his Swiss home. Outside, snow blanketed the hills, soft and endless. Inside, Charlie sat with a cane across his knees. The same cane that once spun and twirled before roaring crowds. His hands trembled now, but his eyes still carried the glint of mischief. The world had not forgotten him. Honors arrived late, but they arrived. In 1972, America called him back, offering an Oscar and an ovation so long, so thunderous, it seemed to wash away years of exile. He stood on that stage, older, frailer, but when the applause broke over him, his eyes filled. For once he did not perform. He simply bowed. In quiet moments, he thought often of shadows. The damp room in South London, where his mother coughed in the dark, the cold beds of the workhouse, the thin broth, the thin blankets, the thin hope. He thought of the night he stumbled onto a stage as a child, imitating cruelty until it turned into laughter. That was the beginning, though he hadn't known it then. He understood now that his whole life had been stitched together from those shadows. Every pratfall, every smile through tears, every defiant rise after a fall. It was all the boy he had been, transformed into light. The tramp was not just a character. He was hunger made human, dignity in rags, hope that refused to die. Charlie's children played in the garden. Their laughter carried through the window, warm and clear. He closed his eyes, hearing in it the same music that had followed him all his life. Not fame, not fortune, laughter, the truest sound of survival. One evening, as the light faded, he lifted the bowler hat from the table and rested it gently in his lap. The hat was worn, the felt thin, the brim soft with years. But it was enough, more than enough. Charlie Chaplin, the boy who once begged for scraps, had left the world a gift that would never fade, proof that even the poorest child in the darkest corner can turn sorrow into joy and be remembered for it.
If you're still awake, please like and subscribe for more. Otherwise, sleep tight, and I'll see you next time.